we're going to get started. Welcome to the UA presidential debate hosted by the TAC. I'm Will, I'm the chairman of the TAC.
I'm Tushar, I'm the executive editor.
We've prepared some questions that we'd like to ask them for about 45 minutes. After that, we'll open it up to audience participation, allow you to ask your questions of the candidates. Before that, though, we've asked each of the tickets to prepare a 2-minute opening statement to begin the debate. So we'll turn it over to them now, beginning with, I think that's Matthew and Sophia on the far right, and then we'll work towards us. So go for it, guys.
In mid-December 2011, I received a letter that I was admitted to MIT, a place that had long captured my imagination. I envisioned a playground of ideas, a place where one would think of an idea and bring it to life. And while MIT has, to some extent, provided such opportunities, we have a long way to go as a student body to make this vision a reality. There is a new horizon dawning for student government at MIT. This new dawn brings with the hopes and dreams of a generation of students that aspire higher, desire better, and deserve more. It is the dream of those that came to MIT looking for a world of unlimited opportunity, a place to take risks and pursue great challenges, and an institute that is accepting and encouraging of academic and personal pursuits and empowers students to achieve them. The premise of our campaign is simple: that in order to achieve this future, we must have a structured student government that can pursue long-term goals and not muddle in the year-to-year. That if we wish to solve the problems of today, we must look to the world of tomorrow and orient our efforts and our abilities towards reaching that future. To do so, we must work together and use the core of what makes MIT great: collaboration, honesty, and openness to make our community a better place. It is time that undergraduates inherited their place as a stakeholder in the future of our institution. It is time that undergraduates have a student government worthy of their intellect, their passion, and their trust. It is time that we work together to build a community that reflects our highest ideals and values and will last well into the future. And this means that the time for miscommunication and discord between students and administrators must come to an end. And as one community, we must embark on a path of mutual respect to build an institution that educates and empowers the best and brightest students to make an awesome impact on the world around them. We are Matthew Davis and Sophia Liu, and together we have the experience and knowledge necessary to take us there. And at the conclusion of this debate, we hope that you will vote for us, and in so doing, vote for a better future for ourselves and our institution. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Laila Shehata. I'm a junior in course 20 and I'm the current UA chair for MIT 2030. Because of that, this past year I've had the opportunity to serve on the Student Housing Advisory Council with the Chancellor, and I've also recently started serving on the Committee on Undergraduate Programming, and additionally the undergraduate representative for the West Campus Planning Committee when that starts later this year. Our platform is focused on 3 main things: building community, as well as increasing transparency and communication. In regards to community, we want to really focus on improving mental health, increasing student-faculty interactions at MIT, as well as improving student-admin relations and increasing student interactions outside the living groups. And to that end, we've already started working on a really cool project to improve the Student Center, which Robert has been working on. So I'd like to introduce himself too.
Hi, I'm Robert. I'm the current chair of the Special Projects Committee, and I joined this committee not really knowing what it was in my freshman year, wanting to get a feel for how we run MIT, how changes are made that affect my life and my peers around me. And it feels that many of us, most of us, aren't necessarily aware of what's going on, and this has brought us to the realization that communication is incredibly important. For the most part, it's lost on certain members of the student leadership that MIT is composed of a very large breadth of different communities, very diverse breadth of communities, and should be represented as the community of communities it is. And this is where these 2 main points come from. I've been working on various projects, including renovating the Student Center and working with Laila on town hall debates, which you'll hear all about later in this debate, to try and address these points. And I look forward to chatting with all of you over the course of the next 2 hours.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Wang, this is Siobhan Rigby. We're both juniors at MIT, and I'd like to tell you in short why we are running. And the answer is actually very short. It's because we care. And we care about this community so much that sometimes it hurts, and I think past recent events have shown us that we can hurt as a community, but as a community we can also come together and grow stronger. Laila and I are we are passionate about building better student government at MIT, and we are fully and personally dedicated to doing a better job. Some of you might not know this, but it might be that whoever wins this election might have to hit the ground running and start their term this semester, and we are absolutely committed to doing that if the case arises. So in short, we have a vision to fix what's been broken these last few years in the MIT student government, and we are absolutely committed to seeing that happen. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Siobhan, and I just want to address our specific issues that we want to address if we were to become UA president and vice president. Specifically, we want to effectively advocate for student mental health. We want to maintain momentum against sexual assault. We want to increase cohesion in student leadership and increase accountability and efficiency through transparency. And we also want to help develop and lead student leaders at a young age so that there can be institutional memory in the UA for future generations of MIT students. Thank you.
Thanks to all the candidates for warm opening remarks. We're going to move on to the question portion, where we've prepared a set of questions to ask each of the candidates. We'll ask each ticket to keep their answer to a minute and a half for each question. And our first question is, why do we need an undergraduate association? Why don't we go backwards from what we did last time, so moving Daniel to the right.
So the question was, why do we need an MIT undergraduate government? And I think that it's because we've been entrusted with so much power and so much responsibility and so much autonomy as an undergraduate body. For example, the MIT allows students to decide which student groups are recognized and receive funding from MIT instead of doing it themselves. And so there's a lot of autonomy and power and responsibility that's been given to us. And as student leaders, we need to see that this power is responsibly exercised and also exercised to the benefit of the MIT students whom we represent.
Also to add to that, as MIT students, we have many student governments. The UA is just one of them. But what the UA does specifically is it connects student leaders to the administration. And so it's that connecting chain that's critical.
So one thing we've noticed when talking to students throughout this process has been that there's a lot of students who care and then tend to approach issues themselves by going to administration, which causes a lot of discord and various conversations happening about the same thing. So the UA should really be that point where we can consolidate all the students' opinions and bring what students want to the administration from one focused area to actually get things done, work on policy. An example of this that's been done in regards to more programming is SMASH, which is not UA related, but they've consolidated student health groups and made that really a good place for action to be taken. So the UA should be that focus for policy in all regards to student life.
The only thing that I can add to that is that we have been working on specific examples of this already, and we're currently implementing a town hall style meeting, working together with Chancellor Barnhart, Dean Humphreys, and various other people to get information flowing freely between students and the administration. And it's the UA's responsibility to initiate these kinds of projects, which are beyond the purview of most other student governments on campus, which Siobhan mentioned.
The Undergraduate Association at MIT is the only campus-wide governing organization. And if you think about the extent of things that MIT does, it's kind of incredible. If you walk inside the basement and you just see the pipes that connects to every single lab, and you think that every single day there are people that make sure that every lab has gas, has water, has the resources it needs to do. That kind of gives you an extent and an impression of the awesome things that MIT accomplishes every day, and that's just kind of a minor thing. The UA brings students into this conversation about how we run MIT, how we get involved in it, and it's the only organization that can do that. It's the only organization that can reach out to IFC, to Panhell, to DormCon, and sit them all down at the same table and say, hey, We want to go ahead and tackle mental health today, and we're going to work on this as a community, and we're going to get this done, and we're going to work on policies and events in order to raise awareness and accomplish some goals in this community. It brings undergraduates as a stakeholder in the Institute. You have faculty, you have administrators, you have staff, you have graduates, and you have undergraduates. And we have a role inside the future of the Institute. We have a role in the present time of the Institute. The Undergraduate Association is the institution that brings undergraduates to the table in that discussion. It represents undergraduates and the whole range of activities undergraduates perform. And that is why the Undergraduate Association is important, is to make your voice heard in everything that the Institute does.
And if I may add, it's a great question. Why do we need a student government? And fundamentally, it's because we have students that care enough to have that need, right? If you look at other colleges across the United States, student government isn't as big there. And we have the potential here to really unite and provide a really efficient, effective front to work with admins to have successful solutions for students and to represent the student voice. And I think, because we have students that care, that needs to be there. We have to be able to speak for and strongly and support students.
Great, thank you. So we've seen planned changes to MIT's physical face from Kendall Square to MIT Nano to the demolition of Bexley. What will you do to represent the student body's voice in the decision-making involved in these projects? Be as specific as possible. Let's start in the middle, and then we'll go to Daniel, and then we'll go to Matthew.
So I'm actually kind of working on this a bit already. As the MIT 2030 chair, I was involved this year with the Bexley interim site planning. And in order to make sure I was getting student input on that, I went to various DormCon meetings, presented at UA Council. I also talked with Bexley students extensively, and I also went to a UA study break and was there with the survey to talk to students about the Bexley site and ask their opinions on it. So I think in regards to when we move on to West Campus and East Campus, doing similar things such as having a way for students to interact at study breaks and having focus groups at dorms would be really good to get students' opinions. And additionally, what Rob and I were talking about with town hall meetings, when we mentioned it's going to be mental health later this month, we also want to have them on other series of events, including housing, to get students involved, be able to talk to administrators about what's happening with housing, and be able to hear opinions other way. Sorry, no one could hear that.
If I can add just quickly, I've been working on renovating the Student Center. I presented the idea to the chairman of the corporation, Bob Millard. I put together a faculty committee to do that. The first meeting was yesterday. And we want to give students an outlet and a space that is state-of-the-art, that is worthy of us as an MIT community, and that provides for our needs. And the Student Center, as it is currently constructed, does not. It is very much still in the 20th century, and it would be very nice to bring it into the 21st century, and I'm actively working on this currently.
So how we would make sure that student input is heard on future physical changes to MIT's campus. First is very obviously the survey. MIT is a very data-driven organization, and when administrators make decisions, they always want to be able to point to the data and say, and this is why we're doing it. So to have a well-run, institutional research survey going out to all the students, and then for us to be able to say, X% of MIT students are in support of this, and Y% of MIT students are against that proposal, is, it's kind of an obvious thing, but it's a very effective tool when negotiating with administrators. And the other thing also, not everyone responds to surveys because we're all very busy people, but to have a listening tour to personally go to the other dorms and other living groups that might be affected by this change. And really that's how MIT students are organized and say, hey, this is going on, you might not have known about this, we would like your input. And I think that's a very effective way to get the students' input and then bring it to the key decision makers such as the chancellor to say, this is what the students think.
Also, making sure that committees like the 2030 committee are representative of the student body, and making sure that we get student input, whether it be from the surveys, as you mentioned, or focus groups like town hall meetings, in the way that Laila mentioned.
All right. So, I look forward to that student renovation then for the Student Center. But The first thing to realize is that the renovations to campus is a multi-year process. So this is something that is not going to end with the current president. It's going to resume under the next president and the president that follows. The first thing that we need to do is organize the logistical capacity within the UA to tackle this multi-year challenge. So what we would do is form a committee made up of students from representative residential bodies and research groups around campus to sit down and provide support to whoever the student rep is on the committees that look at campus planning. The second thing that we need to do is allow students to see what updates are going on. So there's a 2030 website that I don't think many people know about, but MIT has the UA 2030, which is an example, but on the actual UA website, we need to provide updates and abilities for students to provide input on campus planning moving forward. But not just that, but find out what the priorities of students are in terms of campus in general. So I don't want you to just focus on campus planning, I want you to think about what do you want MIT to be doing, and how do we incorporate that into our campus planning. And then the third thing is making sure that we have the transition process available so that when people leave, that the next person is able to pick up right where they left off on the representation on the committee. And that's something that currently lacks in student government. It's something that's incredibly important, and it's something that we'd establish moving forward with campus planning.
And to kind of add to that, we've met with Executive Vice President Israel Ruiz, and he believes that the largest barrier is students just not knowing what's happening. And that's been a redundant issue that's happened so many times with the UA, and that's why communication and transparency are really large focuses for us. When I first met with Matthew, he showed me these 3 websites for the UK Parliament, United States government, and all these websites. He asked me what's missing from these websites, and I was like, I have no idea, Matthew. And he said, there's no get involved button. There's no very clear way for students to get involved, and that's lacking currently in the UA website. And students have no idea how to provide their input. And that's one of our biggest goals, restructuring the UA so that students can have their voices heard, and students know how to do that. And that's completely lacking right now, and we believe that that's the largest barrier to student involvement in student government at MIT.
What do you feel were your predecessors' greatest strengths and weaknesses? What will you do differently than your predecessors? We'll start with Matthew and work to the left.
So I would say that Shrudi's greatest strength is her ability to execute things. I have to laud her very much for her ability to get things done very quickly. I will also say that that is also her greatest weakness, is the fact that she executes things very quickly without collaborating. And that's a very big difference between myself and her, is I'm a very collaborative leader. I bring a team, I work with my team, we make consensus decisions. If a decision has to be made, we make it, making sure that everyone's input's been heard, and we move forward from there. And yeah, that's that. Sophia, you work with her though, so.
I do. So when I came to the UA, I was inspired by Shrudi's vision. I think that's one of her strongest points. She has a vision for leadership at MIT that's unparalleled, I think, except by Matthew. But I think one of her weaknesses is that this vision needs to be carried out by students, and students need to know how they can add to it and how they can build on it. And I think after being lost in the bureaucracy that has been the UA, I was kind of just disillusioned from it. And I was about to leave the UA, and then Matthew came to me and said that we need to change it, and we can change the UA. And I think moving forward, yes, we can do all these things, work in student projects, kind of rehash what's been done before, but fundamentally we have to change the UA structure entirely in order to have it be effective in the long term. And looking at it as right now, I think that's the biggest weakness. Perhaps not attributed to Shrudi entirely, but perhaps also attributed to the structure of the UA itself.
I'd like to agree with what Matthew and Sophia said about Shrudi's vision and her execution. Being on her exec team, she's done a really great job of making sure we all know what we should be getting done and actually having all of our committees be really successful this year. As for what could have been improved, I would say, again, that transparency is a main issue. Within the UA itself, between UA exec, UA council, and the UA officers, we should just make sure that we're actually communicating more clearly about what's going on behind the doors of the administrators' meetings. And then also just between making sure what happens with admin goes to the council, and from there also gets to students. I think that's really important.
Adding to that, it was a lot of fun for me as my first year in the UA to be able to run with an idea the way I could, and the way Shrudi and Billy let us as exec run with ideas. Over the summer, last summer, I visited nearly a dozen different countries on 3 different continents to implement various exchange programs based on innovation for students at MIT. I came back and I was able to look into renovating W20, and I keep working on these cool projects, and they encourage me to go that extra mile and to go after projects that might not necessarily be easy, and that go beyond projects that you see generally. And that's an important quality. It is true that Transparency hasn't always been at the forefront of this process, and that is something that should be improved.
Yes, so what I think is one of Shruti's greatest weaknesses is her lack of communication, and sometimes within even the UA itself, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But, as the other candidates have said, she is very good at doing things and less good at telling people that it's been done and that they don't need to do it. But going back even further, previous presidents like Sid Rao, who was the president before Shruti, I think one of the things we've seen from UA presidents in the past is a lack of commitment, such as when UA presidents resign, as has happened in, for example, 2011. And also previous UA presidents have been less experienced because there was just less interest in the position at the time, and someone who was inexperienced was able to win the election because no one was really experienced who was running. So what we would like to see is more institutional memory from MIT student government, and just to be able to say, this is what we worked on last year, this is where we are now. This is what the administration expects from the student government in the next few months, and that we can bring this forward.
Addressing specifically the structure of the UA, we believe that it's actually a good structure. We believe that it hasn't completely been utilized, though, by previous presidents. We hope to use things like the policy statements that can be developed by the UA Council to give a cohesive student view to the administration, so that the administration isn't confused by what students want and what they're thinking. We also want to utilize the midterm reviews of UA Council leaders to make sure that each representative is effectively doing their position to the best of their abilities.
Great, thank you. According to the most recent survey sent out by Chancellor Barnhart, 35% of females and 14% of male undergrads have experienced some form of unwanted sexual behavior. What has the UA been doing about sexual assault? And do you support these actions, and why? Let's start with Matthew. We just did that. Let's start with Daniel.
Okay, yeah, the UA actually has been doing a lot on this. The UA Health and Wellness Committee, chaired by Chrysanthia and Morgan, worked extensively with the the Title IX Student Working Group, which put on the It's On Us campaign, which is actually continuing. The Title IX Working Group obviously had UA representatives as well as representatives from many other student groups, and helped put together the survey that you got those statistics from. And they've been, working quietly behind the scenes, and they're about to launch the It's On Us Team Challenge, which is happening in 2 or 3 on the 3rd. So it's happening really soon, and we think that the UA has thus far done a pretty good job. But what we think should continue is the Title IX Working Group was designed to coordinate student activities against sexual assaults with administration resources and their advice, because they brought in outside professionals, for example. And we think that the Title IX Working Group is becoming more and more like a student group rather than a coordinating group like SMASH is with student health. So we would like to see that Title IX become more like what it originally was, and obviously support them through the UA Health and Wellness Committee.
So I think Daniel gave a pretty good summary of what the UA Student Support and Wellness Group has been up to. Additionally, they helped coordinate the It's On Us campaign earlier in the year, which I think was a really big success that got around to a lot of the campus. And in general, they do a great job of being the UA's representative on SMASH, and SMASH has been doing a lot to consolidate all the various efforts around student health and wellness at MIT and making sure there's actual campaigns going on with that. So moving forward, we want to make sure we continue to support these initiatives. And additionally, we also want to make sure that we can support what DormCon and IFC and Panhell can do as well as with their constituents, since they also have various programs such as Party Safe Plus that go on kind of a similar note with these two.
There are also concrete things. For example, the SPC, the Special Projects Committee, works with MIT Parking and Transportation. During the snowstorms, shuttles weren't running, and a lot of people were walking across the bridge alone, and there were issues with this. I got to work with Taylor Rose, the Panhell president, to ensure that people have a safe way of moving about on our campus. And small things like that, where we ensure that the infrastructure is there to provide a safe community, and also acting as role models within the UA through the It's On Us videos that the Wellness Committee is bringing out, and initiatives like that. That's probably the two biggest ways that the UA contributes to this.
So yeah, they've mentioned Chrysanthi and Morgan. They're absolutely awesome people, so hardworking, and they're working on a lot of publicity projects, like the It's On Us campaign. It was originally a national project headed by the White House, and they've taken it on themselves to make a really large impact on campus. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of the It's On Us campaign. Second, they've been working with Title IX and VPR to kind of make the statement that sexual assault is a problem on campus. I don't think that there actually has been a formal statement by the UA that establishes sexual assault as a problem on campus. And it's important to recognize that in order to be able to move forward with projects. What we would like to see from the UA moving forward is to work more with Dean Freeman and faculty members, and even with freshmen. Like, how many of you have actually had sexual assault training and awareness after freshman year, right? And it's something that we have to have on a regular basis, the rather experiences at MIT. It's something that after freshman year you might forget, or you might not recognize as a large problem on campus. And being able to work with faculty members who don't necessarily get this training every year, and establishing that it's an important issue that we all have to work towards and constantly be improving on, is something that the UA needs to make a stand for. And that's what Matthew and I really believe students need and students want to see.
To add on to that, this is my second year as a dorm president. I had the opportunity to be a vice president my freshman year, and I've had a lot of experience working with basically all the communities across MIT that are involved in student government. And the one thing that has been lacking in terms of sexual assault awareness and unwanted sexual contact is how do we bring our community and student leaders on board with community change as regards sexual assault? So how do we actually create a welcoming community and have our student leaders, dorm presidents, fraternity presidents, sorority presidents involved in this conversation about how our residential living spaces become safe environments? I've had to reach out independently as a dorm president to Charlotte on the handheld to learn about their STAR program, but I would love to see the UA bringing student leaders together to talk about concrete ways that each community can work towards establishing a welcoming community within their living space.
What do you feel were your predecessors' greatest strengths and weaknesses? What will you do differently than your predecessors? We'll start with Matthew and work to the left.
So I would say that Shrudi's greatest strength is her ability to execute things. I have to laud her very much for her ability to get things done very quickly. I'll also say that that is also her greatest weakness, is the fact that she executes things very quickly without collaborating. And that's a very big difference between myself and her, is I'm a very collaborative leader. I bring a team, I work with my team, we make consensus decisions. If a decision has to be made, we make it, making sure that everyone's input's been heard, and we move forward from there. And yeah, that's that. Sophia, you work with her though, so.
I do. So when I came to the UA, I was inspired by Shrudi's vision. I think that's one of her strongest points. She has a vision for leadership at MIT that's unparalleled, I think, except by Matthew. But I think one of her weaknesses is that this vision needs to be carried out by students, and students need to know how they can add to it and how they can build on it. And I think after being lost in the bureaucracy that has been the UA, I was kind of disillusioned from it. And I was about to leave the UA, and then Matthew came to me and said that we need to change it, and we can change the UA. And I think moving forward, yes, we can do all these things, work in student projects, kind of rehash what's been done before, but fundamentally we have to change the UA structure entirely in order to have it be effective in the long term. And looking at it as right now, I think that's the biggest weakness. Perhaps not attributed to Shrudi entirely, but perhaps also attributed to the structure of the UA itself.
I'd like to agree with what Matthew and Sophia said about Shrudi's vision and her execution. Being on her exec team, she's done a really great job of making sure we all know what we should be getting done and actually having all of our committees be really successful this year. As for what could have been improved, I would say, again, that transparency is a main issue. Within the UA itself, between UA exec, UA council, and the UA officers, we should just make sure that we're actually communicating more clearly about what's going on behind the doors of the administrators' meetings. And then also just between making sure what happens with admin goes to the council and from there also gets to students. I think that's really important.
Adding to that, it was a lot of fun for me as my first year in the UA to be able to run with an idea the way I could and the way Shrudi and Billy let us as exec run with ideas. over the summer, last summer, I visited nearly a dozen different countries on 3 different continents to implement various exchange programs based on innovation for students at MIT. I came back and I was able to look into renovating W20, and I keep working on these cool projects, and they encourage me to go that extra mile and to go after projects that might not necessarily be easy, and that go beyond projects that you see generally. And that's an important quality. It is true that transparency hasn't always been at the forefront of this process, and that is something that should be improved.
Yes, so what I think is one of Shruti's greatest weaknesses is her lack of communication, and sometimes within even the UA itself, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But as the other candidate said, she is very good at doing things and less good at telling people that it's been done and that they don't need to do it. But going back even further, previous presidents like Sid Rao, who was the president before Shruti, I think one of the things we've seen from UA presidents in the past is a lack of commitment, such as when UA presidents resign, as has happened in, for example, 2011. And also previous UA presidents have been less experienced because there was just less interest in the position at the time, and someone who was inexperienced was able to win the election because no one was really experienced who was running. So what we would like to see is more institutional memory from MIT student government, and just to be able to say, this is what we worked on last year, this is where we are now. This is what the administration expects from the student government in the next few months, and that we can bring this forward.
Addressing specifically the structure of the UA, we believe that it's actually a good structure. We believe that it hasn't completely been utilized, though, by previous presidents. We hope to use things like the policy statements that can be developed by the UA Council to give a cohesive student view to the administration, so that the administration isn't confused by what students want and what they're thinking. We also want to utilize the midterm reviews of UA Council leaders to make sure that each representative is effectively doing their position to the best of their abilities.
Great, thank you. According to the most recent survey sent out by Chancellor Barnhart, 35% of females and 14% of male undergrads have experienced some form of unwanted sexual behavior. What has the UA been doing about sexual assault? And do you support these actions, and why? Let's start with Matthew. We just did that. Let's start with Daniel.
Okay, yeah, the UA actually has been doing a lot on this. The UA Health and Wellness Committee, chaired by Chrysanthia and Morgan, worked extensively with the the Title IX Student Working Group, which put on the It's On Us campaign, which is actually continuing. The Title IX Working Group obviously had UA representatives as well as representatives from many other student groups, and helped put together the survey that you got those statistics from. And they've been, working quietly behind the scenes, and they're about to launch the It's On Us Team Challenge, which is happening in 2 or 3 on the 3rd. So it's happening really soon, and we think that the UA has thus far done a pretty good job. But what we think should continue is the Title IX Working Group was designed to coordinate student activities against sexual assault with administration resources and their advice, because they brought in outside professionals, for example. And we think that the Title IX Working Group is becoming more and more like a student group rather than a coordinating group like SMASH is with student health. So we would like to see that Title IX become more like what it originally was, and obviously support them through the UA Health and Wellness Committee.
So I think Daniel gave a pretty good summary of what the UA Student Support and Wellness Group has been up to. Additionally, they helped coordinate the It's On Us campaign earlier in the year, which I think was a really big success that got around to a lot of the campus. And in general, they do a great job of being the UA's representative on SMASH, and SMASH has been doing a lot to consolidate all the various efforts around student health and wellness at MIT and making sure there's actual campaigns going on with that. So moving forward, we want to make sure we continue to support these initiatives. And additionally, we also want to make sure that we can support what DormCon and IFC and Panhell can do, as well as with their constituents, since they also have various programs such as Party Safe Plus that go on kind of a similar note with these two.
There are also concrete things. For example, the SPC, the Special Projects Committee, works with MIT Parking and Transportation. During the snowstorms, shuttles weren't running, and a lot of people were walking across the bridge alone, and there were issues with this. I got to work with Taylor Rose, the Pan Health president, to ensure that people have a safe way of moving about on our campus. And small things like that, where we ensure that the infrastructure is there to provide a safe community, and also acting as role models within the UA through the It's On Us videos that the Wellness Committee is bringing out, and initiatives like that. That's probably the two biggest ways that the UA contributes to this.
So yeah, they've mentioned Chrysanthi and Morgan. They're absolutely awesome people, so hardworking, and they've been working on a lot of publicity projects, like the It's On Us campaign. It was originally a national project headed by the White House, and they've taken it on themselves to make a really large impact on campus. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of the It's On Us campaign. Second, they've been working with Title IX and VPR to kind of make the statement that sexual assault is a problem on campus. I don't think that there actually has been a formal statement by the UA that establishes sexual assault as a problem on campus. And it's important to recognize that in order to be able to move forward with projects. What we want to see from the UA moving forward is to work more with Dean Freeman and faculty members, and even with freshmen. Like, how many of you have actually had sexual assault training and awareness after freshman year, right? And it's something that we have to have on a regular basis throughout our experiences at MITs. It's something that after freshman year you might forget, or you might not recognize as a large problem on campus. And being able to work with faculty members who don't necessarily get this training every year, and establishing that it's an important issue that we all have to work towards and constantly be improving on, is something that the UA needs to make a stand for. And that's what Matthew and I really believe students need and students want to see.
To add on to that, this is my second year as a dorm president. I had the opportunity to be a vice president my freshman year, and I've had a lot of experience working with basically all the communities across MIT that are involved in student government. And the one thing that has been lacking in terms of sexual assault awareness and unwanted sexual contact is, how do we bring our community and student leaders on board with community change as regards sexual assault? So how do we actually create a welcoming community and have our student leaders, dorm presidents, fraternity presidents, sorority presidents involved in this conversation about how our residential living spaces become safe environments? I've had to reach out independently as a dorm president to Charlotte on the Handheld to learn about their STAR program, but I would love to see the UA bringing student leaders together to talk about concrete ways that each community can work towards establishing a welcoming community within their living space.
Our next question will focus on student health, student mental health at MIT. Student mental health has been widely discussed on campus. What is the role of the UA in student mental health and wellness? We'll start with Laila and then go to Daniel and then Matthew.
So as you mentioned before, we think that, is this off again? No. We think that for the UA it should be more of a policy push, because there are already a lot of groups that are working more in the reducing stigma, etc. And one idea that me and Robert have recently begun working on is a town hall style of discussion. So what this would entail would be having administrators who are involved in mental health and student wellness on the panel, and they can introduce themselves, say current initiatives they're working on, and then have a question and answer session with audience members from the student body themselves, which allows students not only to hear what's going on from the administrative point of view and share their opinions, but for the administrators to also hear from students directly themselves what they want changed. And we hope that this will be kind of a good first start to have more events like this in the future.
Working and talking to Chrysanthi and Morgan, the mental health process at MIT is a very complex one, and as a result of that, a lot of people don't know what's going on. There are rumors about, say, liability and things like that that go around, and we hope that through an open discourse and a transparent discourse with administration, we can aim to show and highlight what the administration is doing to help mental health, and to see where bigger changes, not just quick fixes, can be implemented to really make a difference, and to avoid tragedies like the ones that happened over the past couple weeks.
So in our point of view, the role of the UA is really largely a coordinating organization. But because SMASH already exists, it's better for us to just direct people to SMASH, but then act as kind of their logistical background and be able to say, we can connect you guys to the administrators, because, the chancellor told me that, if you guys can put something together, the money is there, right? But the UA is charged with representing students to the administration and other stakeholders, actually. And to be able to say, we'll help you guys out, we'll bring people to you, we'll get you the money you need, and we'll actually help you communicate what you're doing to the students, and kind of be that logistical background for you, because Student Action already exists and is doing a pretty good job at improving, in their own little, in their own different and varied ways, student mental health at MIT.
Specifically, some other things that we would hope to accomplish would be to bring counselors to specific living groups, so that they could coordinate with students individually, instead of having to go all the way to mental health, and maybe making counselors more accessible to students here at MIT. We would also want to create a mental health summit where we bring advocates, leaders, admins, and effective students together to help create a policy and hopefully a 10-year strategic plan by using a visiting committee or an institutional committee. And by doing this, create a plan that could be implemented over time to help student mental health at MIT.
I strongly agree with Daniel's platform with mental health. But to add on to it, I think it's very important to recognize that mental health is very much different, and wellness is very much different from community to community and person to person. I'm a big fan of town halls, don't get me wrong. I love getting a group of people together and talking about things, but it's important that we have community conversations within each community to talk about how each community is different in regards to its response to mental health and wellness. And the really big thing, the reason that I like the Mental Health Summit so much is because the one thing that we lack is information. There's a lot of stuff that's said about mental health and wellness around campus, but we have not collected the information necessary to move forward with policy solutions to it, to work with administrators and staff to do it. Mental Health Summit's a great idea. The enrolled student survey, which I sincerely encourage everyone to fill out, has some questions on there that are great for information. Further surveys about mental health and wellness at the Institute are incredibly important. Once we have that information together, then we can work with each community to improve mental health and wellness across MIT.
And on top of that, a lot of students have said that one of the biggest issues is mental health is often stereotyped to be just depression related. And the reality is that MIT students feel anxiety, feel other things other than the classical overarching label of depression. And making that a very clear priority of the UA to address is something that we hope to do. Furthermore, Joanne's out with this fantastic idea that there's no currently established alumni fund for alumni to donate straight to mental health. That's something that's completely inappropriate, we believe, and I think we need to have a way for alumni to support students here at MIT through mental health services. The next point is that, for example, Mary told us, the president of McCormick, that mental health leave is a completely ambiguous topic at MIT. No one knows what happens if you go into SQ or mental health and ask for time off, right? Making that community a much stronger support system here at MIT is something that will help people feel more comfortable with the idea of mental leave, and also not be afraid that their academics, their livelihoods will be suffered because of personal time that they need to take off for. The last thing is that students have asked for a lot more resources at Mental Health, at S-Cubed. The thing is that a lot of these things are already growing and nobody knows about it. S-Cubed is getting 2 new deans this year, and students that I've told this to have been like, wow, that's fantastic, how come we don't know about it? The UA needs to work on all these projects, but also, yes, communicate to students that these projects are actually being worked on, and that people can help make their voices heard and also contribute more ideas. Having seen a lot of solutions on campus, it's absolutely true that with the 4,000 undergrads that we have here,
Sorry.
there are definitely more ideas out there. Thank you.
All right, another question on mental health. A recent post on the MIT Confessions page called for an examination of the role of MIT's culture in the recent tragedies both on and off campus. Does MIT student culture contribute to the unnecessary level of stress on campus? Let's start with Matthew.
So actually there was a report very recently by Shruti with admins that said that the stress levels at MIT are actually comparable to our peer institutions. So the bottom line is that stress at MIT isn't necessarily the underlying cause of our culture here in our community. And for the UA to actually build community, there's the problem that we really don't communicate with students. Students don't know how to get involved. Students don't know that they can do all these things to feel part of the community. And that's something that Matthew and I really, really want to work on to build a sense of community here.
Yes, the climate of MIT does contribute to stress, and it contributes to unhealthy stress. The number one source of stress for me is I came to MIT and I wanted to do a lot of independent projects, but I feel so much academic pressure due to failures in terms of grade policy, grade transparency, to put more time into certain classes than other classes that it reduces my ability to do independent projects. I feel stressed when faculty are rude or blatantly biased or against people, against groups, against people and students inside my class. That adds stress to my MIT experience. The culture of MIT does contribute to unhealthy stress, and it's something that we do need to look at, and it's something that requires forming a basis of understanding between students and faculty and administrators about where each one of us is coming from and where we intend to go as a community.
Laila should be next.
So I understand where the other opinions are coming from about the culture contributing to stress, but it is also worth noting that the culture we have at MIT is a tight-knit one with tight communities, and for me personally, this has been a great source of help and of support when I needed it most. What's important is to convey what parts of our culture may be damaging to us and what parts aren't, and convey this to faculty too. I went to a recent faculty meeting, and the faculty asked how they can be empowered to reach out to students when a tragedy occurs. And it is this empowerment, which seems so obvious to us, right? Of course they should reach out, of course they can reach out, but they don't know how. They don't know how to talk to us best, and it's this kind of education that faculty need, which could go a long way to helping improve not just the student culture, but also the overarching institute culture.
All I want to add to that is in the past few weeks when we've had all these recent tragedies, there has been a lot of outpouring of students saying how they felt at times at MIT when they've been stressed and when they've had these issues. I think it's really great that people are finally feeling open to talk about this, but we don't want that to stop. And we want to be able to have more forums where people feel comfortable discussing their struggles at MIT, such as the recent imposter syndrome panel, maybe topics on openly discussing mental health. There's also a panel about take leave at MIT. Being able to create these discussions and let people know it's okay to struggle here. There's going to be a recent campaign on. We think that's really important as well.
Yeah, Matt and Laila have made really great points, and I would agree that there are parts of the culture that do contribute to stress, and there are parts that help defuse some of that stress. But I think one of the things is really that strikes me as very unhelpful is this kind of who's more host mentality. And I bring this up because I notice that even when I work with administrators, sometimes I go to them and I say, you know, like, we're doing this, we'd like to see more resources in this area. And they come back and say, you know, like, I'm really busy too, I'm busier than you are. And see that how this culture permeates even to the highest levels of administration, I think it's really telling about the MIT culture, and that we have to critically examine ourselves as a community, see what parts are helpful, which parts aren't, and how we can improve those things. Another thing is just that MIT students feel like they have to be perfect, and I think there's a recent tech survey that said 80% of MIT students feel like they're below average, when 90% of drivers think they're above average. So in that regard, I think that we think we only see the best of everyone else, and we don't see how everyone else is struggling the same way that we are. And I think that having more community discussions where respected leaders, maybe administrators, come forward and say, I have these problems too, I think would make people feel a lot better and be much more willing to seek help when they need it.
I think one thing for specifics that I wanted to add was that in some ways MIT is doing things great. I mean, I think that we have a very collaborative community in some ways. But I think when I'm collaborating with other students at 2 a.m., it's not really helpful to my sleep, which is probably affecting my stress. I'd say that we have some great mental health resources, better than many of our peer institutions. But in some ways, there's limited availability. And I know students who can't consistently get the same counselor for a session every 2 weeks. But when you're dealing with a difficult issue, it's very important that you see the same counselor who understands your position. I think we have many support groups here at MIT, but there's some social stigma, especially with younger students, about going to see these support groups and taking the time needed, whether it is taking time off or taking the extra day to do the PSET to get things done. And so I think that we have both at MIT, and we need to address where our problems are specifically.
All right, thank you. So many students have expressed frustration with the new security policies this year. The introduction of Allied Barton workers, parent visiting policies, and guest lists. Have we reached an optimal solution with dorm security? And if not, what would you change? If so, why do you support these policies? Daniel?
So I think most of us will agree that we have not reached an optimum point, and unfortunately, I don't live in one of the dorms that's particularly affected, and I just have to honestly say I don't have that much information on this. Obviously, I think though this is something that we have to address as a community and communicate to people why these decisions were made. I think people might not know anymore that a student at Next House was stabbed years ago, which was kind of precipitated this whole dorm security discussion. And I think letting people know like why these things are happening and bringing people into a discussion that's long term, because often these decisions are made and then implemented 2 years later, and people don't know about it, and they think that like this was kind of shoved in under their nose. I just think that there needs to be a lot more transparency on this issue for myself as well, because I'm not that educated on this.
I have lived in McCormick for 2 years, and I remember my freshman year when Sean Collier died. I remember when my coach told me the afternoon before that MIT was safe. And truly I believe it was because of Sean Collier, but I also believe that the security measures that were taken over the next 2 years precipitated in part because of that as well. And I think that they are critical. I think that it's important that students communicate with administration and with the people who are making these policy decisions on security issues. I believe that one of the things that students find hard is that it's difficult for their friends to come into the dorms. Maybe making larger guest lists will help this problem. I believe at many peer institutions that you can't get into the dorm unless you live there. So I think that the policies that we currently have are consistent with other universities, and MIT maybe wanted to make sure that they were consistent considering the recent tragedies.
So I also didn't live in a dorm, but I've been very frustrated with how this situation has been handled. I know Lily and Chen put a lot of effort into collecting student opinions and making sure there was like a list of what students want as far as dorm security goes. When she took this to the chancellor, she was told that she would have to kind of start back over from the beginning of the process and go up with a very certain route of communication. And considering she already put so much effort in and gotten so many student opinions, I don't think this was the way to handle the issue. So hopefully we can try and remedy this in the future. And I also think that this is an issue that DormCon should mainly be handling as they have been, and that the UA is mainly there as a support system because it does affect dorms and not the other living groups out there.
Living in Burton Connor, these changes have been extremely frustrating, and they seem to represent an example of MIT thinking a little harder and not necessarily smarter. It's still very easy to get into Burton Connor if you forget your ID outside and you can climb in through one of the bottom windows or walk in behind someone else. And so these changes haven't addressed security. They've only made our lives a little bit less pleasant. It's also, there have been rumors going around of an allied Barton employee urinating themselves because of the policies in place for getting a toilet break. They receive regular food donations from students because they tend not to eat very much on the job. And this isn't the precedent that MIT should be setting, and this isn't how we should deal with security. I agree it's an important issue, but we haven't addressed it correctly at all.
Security highlights the number one problem facing student government, which is that it fails to address multi-year challenges. You could have seen security coming from 2008. It's been something that's been discussed at the Institute for a long time. There's been 3 reports about it. At Newhouse, we saw it coming, and we saw it coming many months in advance. We formed a security advocacy committee that would, if in case negotiations with administration failed, would stuff their mailboxes, send phone calls to them continuously, disrupting operations, picket outside of their offices, these kinds of things, because security is very important. And they supported the efforts of our main security committee, and our security committee formed a security plan for Newhouse and worked collaboratively with the contractors and administration to come up with a security plan for our dorm. And while it's not perfect, we kept all of our entrances open. We have access to all of our courtyards. Our cameras are on the outside of the building. These things, this is an example of what happens if student government is forward-thinking and future-thinking instead of living directly inside the present. And so moving forward with security, we should support dormitory council's efforts, but we should also be mindful about whether some kind of new security is going to come the way of fraternities and sororities. I'm not saying that it's going to, but it's something that we need to be mindful of and planning for, just in case it does. And furthermore, we need to highlight confidentiality challenges. A large part of the security dilemma was that student leaders were confused about what they could share from information, what they could share concerning conversations with administrators, surrounding security. And East Campus is going to have security 5 years from now once their dorm is renovated. We need to be thinking about that. So if we have a student government that can tackle multi-year challenges, that solves the confidentiality problems, that is able to see things coming around the corner, that would be quite precious, and it would also be quite wonderful for our student government to do moving forward.
Yeah, and I live in Baker House, and our policies probably changed at least 3 or 4 times in the last 2 years. And I've never been one moment confused about why it's changed or that there's a lack of student input. There are regular surveys out, and I've always felt included in the discussion. And I think that's the kind of attitude that we have to take towards security. A lot of the issues with security aren't that students feel like we shouldn't have any security at all. It's just that we don't feel like we're being heard. And so moving forward, that's what we really want to focus on.
Recently, concerns have been raised over the legitimacy of expenses at the Little B event. What are your views on this recent event and on the transparency of the funds? We'll start with Laila, and then go to Matthew, and then Daniel.
Sorry, I actually couldn't hear the question. Could you repeat that?
Sorry. Recently, concerns have been raised over the legitimacy of expenses at the Little B event. What are your views on this recent event and on the transparency of UA funds?
So, the issue with the Little B event, for those that don't know, is that a sum of money was paid out for an event, and it wasn't, the process wasn't as transparent as it should have been, to summarize quickly. And it highlights the issues that we have in our government, right? It highlights the lack of transparency, and it highlights that we currently have a government that makes choices that aren't necessarily reflective of the overall student perspective. And this isn't to disenfranchise Shruti. I think it is a symptom of the way the UA is currently organized. And it is very unfortunate that the issue has come as far as it has. But we hope that we can use the momentum it has created to push for a more transparent UA.
Just going off of what Robert has said, I think that this is really a good instance of when we can try and make more like bylaws and kind of edit the Constitution in order to make sure there's things in place for how we should be kind of approaching these financial issues, because basically we should make sure that there is more structure of when the UA officers should be coming to council about these financial issues as well as others, so that this doesn't happen in the future.
So I've had the pleasure of being on council for the past 3 years, and this incident definitely demonstrates something that has been endemic to the UA for a long time, which is the lack of an accountability structure within the organization. It's a lack of a structure that holds officers accountable for themselves, and it's a lack of a structure and independence from council to be able to hold them accountable. So specifically moving forward, the funding problem for Little B, and it automatically kind of brings forward these solutions. First, that council has its own independent speaker, that it is chaired by someone who is not the UA president, who has an agenda reflective of council. Secondly, that there is a person responsible within the UA, either giving more powers to judge board or power to someone that is appointed by council, to hold the officers and exec accountable for their actions. And our plan is to give a monthly report to council from this person or individual or group concerning all constitutional or governing document violations that we incur. And the third thing, which is just kind of very important, is transparency. There's a lot of documents that the UA has that it does not follow. And it is absolutely essential that as a governing body that represents students, that you follow the word of what you publish out to the people that you represent. You cannot deviate from this, because if you deviate it, you're becoming exclusive. You're becoming an elite core of people that is not representative of the people outside, that other people are confused about how to join. So the funding problem is representative of a transparency issue, it's representative of an accountability issue, and it's representative of an involvement issue.
And just to add one point about the budget in the UA, when UA councilors are elected in, they have 1 day basically, or actually 3 days because you see the budget, to vote on whether or not it passes. As a new council member, you're sitting in that large Senate chambers, looking at this budget, and you say, okay, I'll pass it. There's no knowledge to them that this is about $100,000 spending that we're basically allocating on day one, and they have no idea. We want to establish a system where council members are actively participating in creating the budget and also know enough about what the budget is to make an educated, informed decision to represent their constituents.
And that goes back to following the Constitution, which specifically has a budget process outlined in it.
Yeah, I will agree with the Judicial Board, which issued a statement that said basically that the Constitution was not followed regarding the allocation of the funds for the LUPI. That authority lies with UA Council, which was not consulted. So what I think, though, is that this is not so much a failure of the structure in that we did the right thing and the wrong result happened. It was that the wrong thing was done and therefore the wrong result happened. And I think that we just have to be more careful about following the rules that we have set out for ourselves that are outlined in the UA Constitution and which are published and should be, they're publicly available, and we just should be more careful about following them. Council has the authority to approve the funding, and Council has the authority to hold the UA exec members accountable by either censuring them or holding recall elections or in other ways of removing them from office. So I think that we just have to build a more effective organization that's better at following its own rules and has the expertise to be able to decide, when things go wrong, what is the proper process for adjudicating it and then carrying it out.
I just wanted to say that there are examples of when funding is used appropriately. Students, for instance, at the end of last calendar year advocated for a Chemi career fair and did not receive the total funding that they wished, and so it's very disappointing to see that over $10,000 went to Little B when less than $2,000 went to this career fair. We want to make sure that all student groups are held to the same standards and just follow this process as we've been talking about. Specifically addressing Matthew, I don't think that we need another person to represent Council as a whole. I think that Council already represents the students. They just need to be better informed, and they also need to be informed of what UA is doing previous to the meetings as we discussed, specifically for the budget.
Thank you. Over the past several months, we've seen 2 fraternities disbanded and a new sorority introduced on campus. In light of these recent events, what is the UA's role in dealing with Greek life? Well, let's start with Matthew.
The UA supports the IFC in what it does. It supports the IFC in establishing its governing structure and its judicial board. And furthermore, I want to make this very clear now that the UA should take an active stance in supporting Greek life at the Institute and supporting what it does. And sure, there's some things that we hear that are bad with it, but there's a lot of positive things that come out of Greek life at the Institute. And so the role of the UA is to support Greek life, to support IFC's and Panhel's efforts to judiciate the sororities, to judiciate the fraternities, to govern them. It's not the UA's role to step in on fraternities and sororities, but it is our role to support the IFC and Panhel and what they do. And that is what we intend to go forward doing and publicly supporting them.
I think Matthew pretty much summed it all up. One thing that I would add is there's been a statement that we should try to separate IFC and Panhel with regards to administrative things, and they're often lumped together, unfortunately, and they're very different entities. That's been something that's been said to us by both groups. So the UA should be an active part of supporting that as well. The second thing is, dorm cons also said that they would like to have more interaction with IFC and Panhel. So moving forward, it'd be awesome to see the UA support perhaps more events that involve different groups coming together in these 3 entities.
I'd like to echo what Matthew and Sophia said. The UA really should be playing a supportive role for Panhel and IFC. They are their own separate entities, and while we should definitely work together with them, it's important that we do not step on their toes or regulate what they're doing. And additionally, one thing we would love to work on next year would be having more regular meetings between Panhel, IFC, DormCon, and the UA leadership to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's going on and how we can be supporting each other in various initiatives.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Regular meetings are important, and what is also important, and that kind of goes back to the previous question, is for the UA and for Council to work together closely, for there not to be animosity between the 2 groups, but for them to work together as a cohesive unit to represent their constituents and to bring about positive change. And that includes supporting each other where necessary, but also granting each other the freedom to act in the best interest of their constituents where necessary.
Yeah, so I think the UA has a very fine balancing act. In the past, the UA has had very little interaction with IFC. I was a member of IFC last year, And we basically only showed up to UA council meetings, and other than that, didn't really talk to the UA president. And I think that that is bad and good, because IFC, Panhandle, and DormCon are their own independent governing boards that have their own judicial authority and have their own budget and have their own constitution and ways of doing things. And so I think, on those issues that relate specifically to a certain, certain living group, group of living groups, I guess, the UA should say, like, this is your territory, you guys know better, you're the experts, you live this, we'll see this you. But then on issues such as housing, which affects the institute as a whole, when the administration says, oh, we're looking at building new dorms, what do you guys think? That's something that affects all the living groups in different ways, and the UA should be the one to unite them, bring them all together and say, this will affect you, what are your opinions on this? And how can we communicate them effectively to the administration?
Yeah, we're really excited about the new sorority coming to campus. We know that sororities and fraternities, personally for us, have given us great support groups, as they do to 30% of women and 50% of men on campus. We believe that focus groups with specific leaders of IFC, Panhandle, and DormCon should come together to address specific issues previous to things coming before the council, so that they can help address the issues and shape the legislation that's brought to council previously.
Thank you. That's all the questions that we prepared. So we'd now like to open up to the floor to any questions you guys have. If you'd like, you can form a line right here and use Tushar's microphone to ask anything you'd like to hear from the candidates.
I'm going to assume that we're starting. This is a multifaceted question. There will always be students, and rightfully so, that do not go through student government channels to accomplish their objectives, and they will approach administrators and present their solutions and problems. What we need is an understanding with administrators that they alert us to when this happens and what we can do to work with that student, work with that administrator moving forward. And have a system in place to support the student if they so wish moving forward with their project. A second part of this that Sophia and I look forward to doing is having an advisor from the UA assigned to each dean of every school and each senior administrator of the institute. And this way, this advisor will be able to know when students approach the administrator and be able to give the administrator the UA's perspective and input about whatever that student is bringing forward, and also provide them with logistical support. So this student told me this, advisor, what do you think? I don't know. Let me go get some more information about that, and I'll come back with you. I'll send this information to you and the student and go from there. And the advisor will also be able to come back to us and say, Chancellor Barnhart or Dean Sipser from School of Science thinks that this is a serious issue. I think this is something we can look into and come back to them and work with him on this. And then that way we have this system that accounts for people that go through, that approach administrators without going to student government, that we know about it and can incorporate this into our policy decisions. And we also have people working intimately with the administrator on a day-to-day basis that they're able to report back to us and identify issues that students bring up as well. And in this way, we keep our policies cohesive, we keep our policies unified. And to address your point about how to get students involved in the organization, we do that through transparency. We do that through having an open, clear avenues to get into the UA that right now don't exist. The way that we intend to do that is by incorporating into each committee's bylaws the specific ways that members join those committees, and then having those very public on the website, having a get involved area on the website, how you can get involved in the UA. We also want to have clear standards for each officer position and each committee chair position, that committees nominate their chair, and that goes forward to council, and that each officer has its own standards. And we want to make sure that we submit weekly reports, strategic reports to council about what the UA is doing, what we intend to do moving forward and why we're doing it, and submit a monthly report to the entire student body outlining all of this information.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Moving on to Laila.
The issue seems to be that we as students don't necessarily trust the UA, and we as students don't necessarily know what the UA is doing. And people come into the UA with a laundry list of action items they want to implement, what they think is right. And Matthew mentioned grassroots efforts, and that's exactly what we need. We need people who have the input and the insights that they have through their position to come to the UA, to trust the UA to implement what they want to do. And we need to reduce the distance between students and the UA. I appreciate that there may be a necessity for more stringent checks and balances, but at the same time we risk that we over-specify, we over-bureaucratize, we over-red tape, and it makes it hard for anyone from the outside who doesn't want to read constitution upon constitution and bylaw to get involved. Specifically, say someone is developing, I don't know, a program that helps students, say like Course Roads, and they realize that it's very difficult for them to work with the administrators and get access to whatever technology they need to actually implement this without using clunky code and going around back doors. And then the UA can implement their weight and implement the fact that they represent the students to push for these changes where a single student by themselves couldn't necessarily do it.
And some of the ideas we have to start with this would be using social media, because the UA does have a Facebook and Twitter page, but Twitter hasn't been used for like 2 years, and the Facebook page is never used to actually update people on current issues and where they could start to get involved if they wanted to. And I think that would go a long way in students who are interested wanting to talk to administrators, knowing that if they want to go to the UA, that things are already happening if they can. Initially updating the UA website so it includes a list of current issues, who's involved, and where a good place to start would be, so that again, students who want to be involved know where to begin.
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head in that there's this chicken and egg problem of people don't trust the UA to do something, they don't think it can be effective, so they try and go around it, and because they go around it, it makes the UA less effective. And so we need somehow to be able to build trust in the UA, and that's a tough sell. But I think what we can start with is cataloging existing student efforts on the hot topic issues, and then being able to say, you should go to these people first. And these people have already been doing stuff, they have a plan that's in action, and you can help out. And hopefully we can work closely with those groups that we refer people to, and over time bring them into the UA, and so the UA can do its job of representing students on these big ticket issues. I think we can ultimately we would like to ask them to join the UA, but because that's a tough sell at the beginning, we need to kind of ease them into this process. And also, like Matthew said, we need to maintain continuous contact with administrators so that we know when someone has gone independently to them, and we can incorporate their ideas, but also take into account the fact that they are only one student, and that we are able to represent a larger, the larger student body at MIT.
I think something that Daniel mentioned earlier was that we want to use the statistics in an experience-based approach. So we also want to make sure that we're using the statistics, using the surveys that we'll be sending out to make sure that we've synthesized the student idea. We also want to make sure that we use a monthly student newsletter so that it synthesizes the ideas for the students, the same way that we're synthesizing the ideas for the administrators, so that they know where they can get involved if they don't happen to follow the Facebook page. We found that this was effective historically.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we're going to finish up with closing statements for each of the tickets. Closing statements will be 2 minutes each for each of the tickets. And in these statements, I think it would be nice to have maybe 3 takeaway points that are both substantive and unique. We all want to strive for transparency, we all want to strive for better ways to deal with mental health and sexual assault, but I want to hear something from each of the tickets that makes you unique from the other tickets, and make sure that the audience had a worthwhile time. Let's start with Daniel, and then let's go to the right. I mean, you're speaking on the fly. I'll give you 15 seconds, sure.
So I would say that the 3 big things that we would, is this on? Sorry. So one of the unique things that we'd like to do is focus on recruitment in the UA, and to hold a lecture series with leaders in the real world who have done substantive issues, such as the former governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, who is luckily spending a year at MIT as part of the Sloan Innovation Initiative. And we think that if we can bring him in and inspire more students to help, the UA can fix its manpower problem, which it has been a perennial problem for the UA. Another thing we think that the UA can really do well on mental health is to hold a mental health summit just as there was a Institute Diversity Summit recently that was well received, and we think that this is an issue where we need to bring together the entire community to discuss solutions and to honestly just have a more open conversation. Finally, for the momentum against sexual assault, we would like to see more administrator relations and administrator action on the Student Title IX Working Group, which has worked effectively in the past. It was originally led by Sarah Rankin, who's the Title IX investigator, but she's since been promoted to coordinator, and they're hiring a new investigator. But if that person is on the Title IX Student Working Group, they're better able to bridge administrative resources with student efforts. And we think that this is a really big step in addressing sexual assault at MIT.
When we were making our platform, we made sure to talk to a lot of students to get general ideas of what people wanted. And from there, we really focused on making a platform that's feasible to do in a year. And I think that's really important to us, is to have what we have on our platform is things we really can start and finish a lot of them within the year and have a lot of long-lasting changes later on. And some of the highlights from our platform that we'd like to point out again are our plans for the Town Hall series, which will allow administrators and students to interact and discuss main issues. And again, that's already being planned. The first event on mental health should be in late April, but there'll be more information on that publicized soon. Additionally, in regards to community and kind of helping to change the culture at MIT, we really want to focus on working with the faculty to address how academics can be improved. I'm not saying make MIT easier, I'm saying use faculty advising and grade transparency, as well as just making faculty more accessible and knowledgeable about student life in order to make this a bit less stressful place and improve discussions among students and faculty.
Just to quickly summarize, we don't want to come in with a laundry list of items, we don't want to come in with all the solutions, but we wanted to make it possible for students to be represented, for the UA to be the institution it should be. We want to make the UA go for big projects which may seem unfeasible, go for renovating things, go for tackling the issues that are actually affecting us and are actually affecting the students that live on this campus and will live on this campus. We want the UA to be an active body and a body people trust, and we want to do this by bringing our community together and by creating transparency, and not through laundry lists and not through extensive ideas that we come in with that aren't realizable.
Sophia and I bring real executive leadership to you. I bring 2 years as a dormitory president, 1 year as a vice president. I bring 2 years as a housing chair for dormitory council. I bring 1 year as a representative on the faculty committee on the library system. I bring years of experience working with administrators at all levels. I bring a semester working as UA secretary. I bring you 9 months working as a UA Judicial Review Board member. And I want to be in the position to solve the things that I have seen wrong with an organization that has for so long not lived up to its potential. Those 3 areas that we will be working on is realizing the fact that most things at MIT take more than 1 year. We have a long list of things to do, and most of them will take more than 1 year, but that's because if you want to do real substantive change for students here at MIT, you need to realize that decisions at the Institute take more than 1 year, and we want to make a structure that makes that possible. We want to have an organization that demonstrates radical openness and provides resources. That radical openness is reflected in our governing documents, it's reflected in how we interact with the student body, it's reflected in many of the points in our platform. And the final thing we want to do is international presence. We want to use the UA to connect students across the world with other universities and with other countries and businesses to enhance the undergraduate experience. Those are the 3 main parts of our platform. Sophia?
I'm a MedLink, I'm involved in AP, I've been the Baker Rooming Chair, I'm class council vice president, and it's been an awesome experience, and the UA secretary. What makes Matthew and us different, and Matthew and I different, is that we care. Everyone here cares. I'm not going to dispute that. But we have the broad and deep experience to make a significant difference. So on April 6th, when you wake up at 8 a.m., feel the excitement like you would for signing up for fencing for PE, and vote Matthew and Sophia Liu for President and Vice President of the UA. Thank you.
We'd like to thank all the candidates for their time preparing for the debate. Thank you all for coming. There's still some pizza left, maybe? We're out of pizza, sorry. Have a great night. Thanks everyone for coming.